The Forgotten Ones explained. The horrors Michael fought before Lucifer's rebellion. We are told the story of Lucifer's rebellion, a glorious, tragic tale of pride and defiance, of a third of the heavenly host cast down into the pit, and of the great Archangel Michael, his sword a pillar of divine fire, leading the armies of God to a triumphant, if sorrowful, victory. It is the story that defines the cosmic struggle between good and evil, light and darkness. But what if this great, famous war was not the first war? What if it was merely the second? A simpler, more comprehensible conflict that was allowed to be remembered, to serve as a cautionary tale, and to cover up the memory of a far older, far more terrifying, and far more fundamental conflict. What if the greatest enemy heaven ever faced was not a rebellious angel, but something that existed before the angels were even conceived? Today, we journey back to the dawn of creation, to a time before the morning star fell, before the concepts of sin and rebellion had even been given a name. We will uncover the story of the first war, a war not of ideology, but of existence itself. A war against the Forgotten Ones, the horrors before hell, and a war that left the great Archangel Michael not just as a victorious general, but as the haunted, silent warden of a terrible, cosmic secret. Welcome to the Eldritch Codex. Today, we seek to explain the true nature of the horrors that Michael and the heavenly host fought, long before Lucifer ever thought to rebel. In the beginning, in the time before time was given a name, before the creation of the seraphim with their 6 wings and the cherubim with their all-seeing eyes, before the celestial choirs sang their first universe-shaking note of praise, before light itself was given its divine command to separate from the infinite, silent, and waiting darkness, there was a period of raw, untamed, and gloriously chaotic creation. The Creator, in this primordial, pre-celestial stage, was not working from a finished, perfect blueprint. The Creator was experimenting. He was painting with the raw, unstable, and beautiful elements of pure potentiality, exploring the very concept of life, of will, and of consciousness. And these first attempts, these first children of the divine imagination, were not the perfect, beautiful, and orderly beings we have come to know as angels. They were something else entirely, something wilder, stranger, and far, far more terrible. They were the Forgotten Ones. They were not good or evil. Such concepts, which rely on the existence of a divine law and the freedom to choose to break it, had not yet been codified. They were simply the first draft. They were beings of pure, untamed, and often contradictory concepts, living, breathing, and terrifying paradoxes given form. Imagine a being of living, geometric light, a creature whose very form was a collection of impossible, non-Euclidean angles that shifted and changed with every passing moment. A being whose gaze could fracture the sanity of any creature built on the principles of ordered, three-dimensional reality. Imagine a creature of pure sound, an entity that did not have a body but existed as a symphony of discordant, reality-bending notes, a song that could build worlds with a single, beautiful harmony and shatter them with a single, terrible, dissonant chord. Imagine an entity of liquid, sentient shadow, a being that could flow through the nascent cosmos, consuming not matter, but the very memories, the very histories of other beings, leaving them as empty, mindless, and beautiful shells, perfect in form but utterly devoid of a soul. These were the Forgotten Ones, known in the most secret and forbidden of celestial texts as the protogonos phobos, the firstborn fears. They were beautiful in their own terrifying and chaotic way. They were the raw, untamed, and unedited thoughts of God, given form before the fundamental laws of physics and theology had been finalized. They were the brilliant but ultimately unstable brainstorm on the celestial drawing board. For an uncounted age, they existed in this primordial, pre-heavenly state, a cosmos of beautiful, unpredictable madness. But as the Creator's grand, ultimate design moved towards a more stable, more harmonious, and more purposeful realistic reality based on order, on free will, on praise, on a clear and necessary distinction between light and dark, it became apparent that these firstborn, chaotic beings had no place in the new, finished cosmos. They were too powerful, too unpredictable, too fundamentally other. They were a glorious but failed experiment. They were a first draft that had to be discarded, a beautiful but flawed foundation that had to be buried deep, before the final, perfect cathedral of heaven could be built upon it. And so, the Creator, in a moment of what must have been profound, and perhaps sorrowful decision, decreed that the age of chaos was over. The Forgotten Ones had to be unmade or at least put away. But they were his first children, born of his first, purest creative impulse. He could not simply annihilate them from existence. Instead, he created a place for them. Prison, a pocket dimension, a fold in the very fabric of reality, a place of perfect and terrible negation. A place known in the most secret of celestial texts as the silent abyss. It was a place of non-existence, a realm of absolute nothingness, where their chaotic natures could be contained, where they would be put into a timeless, dreamless, and eternal slumber. But to perform this great, terrible, and sorrowful task. The task of gathering and imprisoning his own firstborn. The Creator needed an army. An army of beings who were a part of the new, ordered creation. Beings of light, of will, of unshakable, unquestioning loyalty. And so, he created the angels, the host of heaven, and at their head, to be their general, their commander, and their unwavering living standard, he created his masterpiece of martial perfection. His first sword, his right hand of divine power. He created Michael. Michael was not, as he is so often portrayed in later mortal art, a serene, gentle figure with soft, feathery wings, a being of peace and comfort. He was a warrior from his first spark of existence. His very being hummed with the controlled, focused power of a star. His mind was a masterpiece of strategic, tactical, and unwavering loyalty. He was created for one, single, overarching purpose. To enforce the will of the Creator and to defend the new, sacred order of reality. And his first, his greatest, and his most terrible task, the task for which he was truly forged, was to wage war against his own elder, forgotten, and terrible siblings. He was created to be a warden, before he was ever known as a general. And the first war was about to begin. And so began the first war. A conflict so fundamental and so terrible that the later, more famous rebellion of Lucifer would seem like a mere political squabble, a footnote in the true, violent history of the cosmos. This was not a war of ideology, of pride against humility, of good against evil. It was a war of fundamental ontological conflict. It was a battle between two incompatible forms of existence. The new, ordered, and logical creation of the angelic host versus the old, chaotic, and paradoxical creation of the forgotten ones. It was a war to decide the very nature of reality itself. Michael, leading the newly formed, gleaming legions of heaven, the host of the Elohim, was a being of terrible, beautiful, and righteous fury. His great sword was not just a weapon of celestial metal. It was an instrument of divine order, a tool that cut not just ethereal flesh, but also concepts. Every blow he struck was a reassertion of the new laws of reality, a declaration that this is the way things are now. But the forgotten ones did not fight like angels, or the demons of hell would later fight. They did not have armies or military strategies. They did not have a concept of victory or defeat. They simply existed, and their very existence was an attack. The angelic host, in their perfect, golden, and silent formations, advanced across the shifting, pre-celestial landscape, a place of half-formed ideas and dreamlike geography. And the being of living sound, the one known in the sealed texts as the discordant choir, let out a single, piercing cry. It was not a sound of anger or of pain. It was a sound that was, in its very nature, a contradiction, a note that should not exist, a chord that was both major and minor, a sound that was both a whisper and a roar. And as this impossible sound wave washed over the angelic formations, their perfect, orderly ranks shattered. Angels, beings of pure, harmonious, and mathematical light, were torn apart by the sonic paradox, their forms dissolving into shimmering, painful static, their own divine, harmonious essence turned against them. Then, from the swirling chaos, the creature of impossible geometry, the shifting seraph, simply turned its gaze upon a legion of angels. It did not fire a beam of destructive energy. It simply allowed them, for a fraction of a second, to perceive its true form, a being made of angles that were both acute and obtuse at the same time, of lines that were both straight and curved, of surfaces that were both concave and convex. And the minds of the angels, minds that were built on the divine logic and the sacred Euclidean geometry of the new creation, could not process the sight. They broke. They fell into a state of catatonic madness. Their wings folded, their light dimmed, their minds forever trapped in an endless, looping, and unsolvable logical paradox. And the entity of liquid shadow, the memory eater, flowed through the angelic ranks like a river of black, silent ink. It did not have claws or fangs. It simply passed through the forms of the angels it touched. And the angels it touched were left not dead, but empty. Their memories of the creation, their personalities, their very sense of self were consumed, absorbed into the shadow. What was left behind were beautiful, mindless, and hollow angelic shells, perfect in form but utterly devoid of a soul. This was a battle that Michael, the great general, realized with a dawning cold horror that he could not win with strength alone. He was the mightiest warrior in creation, but how do you stab a sound? How do you parry a paradox? How do you block a shadow that consumes thought? He had to learn, in the very heat of this cosmic conceptual battle, to fight not just with his sword, but with his will. He had to learn to impose the idea of order upon the reality of chaos. He rallied his faltering legions. He faced the being of living sound, not by trying to silence it with a greater noise, but by raising his own voice. He led the remaining, terrified host in a great, powerful hymn of creation. a song of such perfect, mathematical, and divine harmony, a song that described the very laws of the new reality, that its orderly, predictable sound waves canceled out the chaotic, paradoxical notes of the Forgotten One, causing its very being to unravel and retreat in confusion. He faced the creature of impossible geometry, and he did not try to look at it. Instead, he held up his great, polished, and perfectly flat shield, a perfect Euclidean plane, and he showed the creature its own reflection. And the shifting seraph, forced for the first time to perceive its own paradoxical nature from an external, ordered perspective, was trapped in a feedback loop of its own maddening existence, its form freezing and locking in place, a statue of impossible angles. And he faced the memory eater, not by trying to strike the shadow, but by focusing the pure, unadulterated, and conceptual light of his own divine being, by becoming a miniature walking sun. He shone so brightly with the pure, conceptual light of self, of identity, and of memory, that the shadow, a being of pure absence, could not consume him, and was forced to recoil from his overwhelming positive presence. The war raged for an age, a conflict that took place in realms that no longer exist, a war whose battles have been erased from all but the most secret and most heavily warded of heavenly records. Michael and his host did not seek to kill the Forgotten Ones, for they were the Creator's first children. Their task was to subdue them, to drive them back, to corral them one by one, like primordial cosmic beasts, towards the shimmering Tyran reality that was the gateway to the silent abyss. The final battle of the first war was against the greatest of them all, a being of pure, unbridled, and endless potential, a creature that was constantly becoming and unbecoming, a formless, beautiful, and terrifying entity known only as the Shaper. The Shaper was the Creator's first and most beloved creation, a being that held within it the potential for all the things that could ever be, and it refused to be imprisoned. Michael faced the Shaper alone, on the very threshold of the silent abyss. Their battle was not one of swords or of light, but of pure conceptual will. The Shaper did not attack him, tempted him. It showed Michael 1,000 alternate realities, 1,000 possible creations, far more beautiful, more interesting, and more dynamic than the ordered, and perhaps more boring one he was fighting for. It showed him worlds of pure emotion, of living music, of endless, blissful chaos, where no one was judged and all things were possible. And Michael, in his unwavering, absolute loyalty, held firm. He did not argue. He did not debate. He simply held up his sword, a perfect, unchanging, and absolute symbol of the single, chosen, and ordered reality he was sworn to defend. And he pushed. He pushed with all his will, with all his faith, and with a great, sorrowful, and necessary act of divine force. He forced the beautiful, terrible, and chaotic Shaper into the abyss with its siblings. The gate to the silent abyss was sealed. The first war was over. Heaven was now safe for the new creation. The angels had been victorious. But they, and especially their great commander, Michael, were forever changed. They had seen things, they had fought things, that were not part of their own ordered reality. And they had been tasked with the most terrible duty of all, to forget. The Creator looked upon his new, ordered heaven, a realm of perfect, celestial harmony, of angelic choirs singing in mathematical precision, of legions of angels arrayed in their glorious, shining ranks. And he saw that it was good. But he also saw, with his omniscient gaze, that the memory of the first war, the raw, traumatic, and paradigm-shattering knowledge of the Forgotten Ones, was a dangerous and destabilizing truth. It was a crack in the very foundation of his perfect creation. How could the new children of creation, the angels who were to be given the precious and dangerous gift of free will, ever feel truly safe, ever feel truly a part of a perfect, divine plan, if they knew that they were merely the second draft? If they knew that their elder siblings, beings of immense and terrifying power, were not dead, not unmade, but merely sleeping, imprisoned in a silent cosmic cage just beyond the walls of their new, beautiful reality? The knowledge was a poison. It would lead to doubt, to fear, and perhaps, eventually, to a new and different kind of rebellion, one born not of pride, but of a terrifying existential uncertainty. And so, a great, divine, and perhaps sorrowful deception was put into place. A collective, celestial memory wipe. The records of the First War, the great cosmic epics of the battles against the Shaper and the discordant choir, were sealed away in the deepest, most inaccessible, and most heavily warded vaults of heaven's great library. The names of the Forgotten Ones were erased from the celestial histories, their very existence redacted from the memory of the cosmos. The angelic host who had fought so bravely in the war, who had witnessed their brothers being driven mad by impossible angles and consumed by thinking shadows, had their memories altered. Their minds were gently, divinely, and completely cleansed of the traumatic, reality-bending horrors they had witnessed. They would remember a great, primordial struggle, yes, a struggle that had forged them into the warriors they now were. But it would be a simplified, allegorical version, a noble battle against a formless chaos, or a nebulous darkness. The impossible angles, the memory-eating shadows, the discordant, reality-shattering notes, all of it was smoothed over, replaced with a more digestible, more heroic, and less psychologically damaging narrative. But Michael, the great archangel, could not be made to forget. He was the general. He was the warden. He had to remember. He had to stand guard over the silent, cosmic prison for all eternity. The full, unvarnished, and terrifying knowledge of what lay sleeping in the silent abyss became his solitary, terrible, and eternal burden. He was the only one in all of heaven, save for the Creator himself, who knew the true, deep, and ancient history of creation, and the terrible price that had been paid to ensure it. And then, with the stage now cleared, with the memory of the first, terrible, and complex play erased from the minds of the actors, a new story was allowed to unfold. A story that was, in its own way, true, but was also a simpler, more comprehensible, and more morally clear-cut conflict. A story that would become the defining myth of the celestial realms. The story of Lucifer's rebellion. Lucifer, the morning star, the light bringer, the most beautiful, most brilliant, and most powerful of all the angels, in his immense, and perhaps understandable pride, looked upon the Creator's newest and most favored creation, humanity. And he was filled with a profound intellectual contempt. He saw a flawed, weak, and foolish race of beings, made of mud and destined to die. And he refused to bow to them, as the Creator had commanded. He saw a flaw in the divine plan. He saw the weakness of these new mortal beings, and he rebelled. "I will set my throne above the stars of God," he declared, his pride a fire that ignited the very heavens. A war erupted in heaven, but this war was different. It was not a war of existence against non-existence. It was a war of ideology, of pride against humility, of rebellion against loyalty. It was a war that the angels could understand. The enemy was not a being of impossible geometry that could break their minds with a glance. It was their own brother, their former comrade. The stakes were not the very fabric of reality, but the sovereignty of the Creator's will. And once again, Michael, the great general, his face a mask of grim, sorrowful duty, led the armies of heaven. He faced Lucifer, his own brother, his former friend, on the celestial plains. Their battle was a thing of terrible, tragic glory, a clash of light against light, of will against will. And Michael, his heart heavy but his loyalty absolute, was once again victorious. Lucifer and his rebellious host, a third of the angels of heaven, were cast out, down into a newly prepared place of punishment, the fiery pit of hell. This story, the story of the war in heaven, became the great, defining narrative of the cosmic struggle. It was a story with clear heroes and clear villains. It was a story with a moral, a lesson about the dangers of pride. It was a story that all could understand, and one that would be told and retold for eons, a cornerstone of the new, ordered reality. And it was the perfect cover story. It replaced the complex, immoral, and terrifying memory of the First War with a simpler, more relatable tale of a family drama, of a political rebellion. The unimaginable, mind-breaking horrors of the Forgotten Ones were replaced by the more familiar, if still terrifying, evil of the demons of hell. The silent abyss, the cold, silent, and conceptual prison of cosmic chaos, was overshadowed by the fiery, more comprehensible prison of hell. And the nature of evil itself was redefined, from a fundamental, chaotic otherness that existed outside of our reality, to a simpler, more understandable concept of pride, disobedience, and a fall from grace. Michael, the great general, played his part perfectly. He became the celebrated, shining hero of the war against Lucifer, and his eternal, secret vigil over the silent abyss was now hidden in plain sight, disguised as his ongoing, eternal struggle against the forces of hell. No one in heaven, save for the Creator himself, ever knew that the demons Michael was so famously and so tirelessly fighting were but a pale, faint shadow of the true, ancient, and far more terrible horrors he was truly and silently standing guard against. He was a hero celebrated for a war that was, in truth, a lesser and more manageable echo of the one he had already won and had been forced to forget. For uncounted eons, the great, divine deception held. The secret of the First War was kept. The universe settled into its new, ordered rhythm. The great, tragic, and understandable story of Lucifer's fall becoming the central myth of the cosmos. But no prison, not even one forged from the very will of the Creator and guarded by the unwavering mind of his mightiest archangel, can remain perfect forever, especially when it is designed to contain the very essence of chaos itself. Over the long, silent ages, the silent abyss, this pocket dimension of absolute non-existence, began to develop flaws. It was not a physical decay. It was a conceptual one. the constant dreaming pressure of the immensely powerful and deeply unhappy beings trapped within began to wear away at the very fabric of their prison. Tiny, almost imperceptible stress fractures began to form in the reality-warped walls, cracks not in stone, but in the very ideas that held the prison together. And through these infinitesimal conceptual cracks, the influence of the Forgotten Ones began to leak out into the ordered creation, like a subtle, colorless, and odorless psychic radiation, a slow, creeping, and ancient madness. This is the unveiled, secret origin of so much of the unexplained and seemingly random horror in the mortal world, the things that our own, simpler myths struggle to explain. When a human being, a philosopher or a mathematician, a man who has devoted his life to the pursuit of pure, cold logic, suddenly goes mad, not from sickness or grief, but from a sudden, terrifying, and paradigm-shattering glimpse of a reality that is not their own, a reality of impossible angles and contradictory logic, they may have, in their deep intellectual quest, brushed their mind against a psychic tendril of the shifting seraph, the creature of impossible geometry. When a place on Earth is so fundamentally and so profoundly haunted that it seems to be actively hostile to life, a place of profound and unnatural wrongness where people vanish without a trace, where compasses spin wildly, and where the very laws of physics seem to bend and warp, it may be a spot where the barrier to the silent abyss is thin, where the influence of a being of anti-existence is seeping through, slowly unmaking the reality around it. And these slow, insidious leaks were not just affecting the mortal world. They were affecting the great warden himself. They were affecting Michael. He, the eternal guardian, was the closest to the prison. He was psychically attuned to it. He could feel its stirrings in a way no other being in creation could. In the quiet moments between his celestial duties, in the dead of night in the silent, golden halls of heaven, he began to have nightmares. Not of the glorious, understandable war he had fought against his brother Lucifer, but of the other, forgotten war. He would hear faint, discordant echoes of the sound creature's impossible cry hidden within the perfect, mathematical harmony of the celestial choirs. A single, wrong note that would send a chill through his divine being. In his dreams, he would see flashes of the Shaper's beautiful, terrible, and ever-changing form in the ordered, predictable patterns of the clouds of heaven. He would look upon a perfect, heavenly sunset, and for a fleeting, terrifying moment, the colors would warp into something alien, something that his mind knew was not right. The knowledge he carried, the secret he was forced to keep, began to take its toll. To the other angels, he was their great, triumphant, and stoic commander, the unshakable sword of God, a being of pure, unwavering certainty. But beneath that perfect, martial surface he was a haunted man. He was the only one who knew the true scale of the danger. He knew that Lucifer and his legions of demons were a manageable threat, a contained and understood rebellion. They fought for a throne, for power, for pride motivations that Michael, as a strategist, could comprehend and counter. But the Forgotten Ones, they did not want to rule. They did not want to conquer. They simply were. And their very being was a contradiction to the ordered reality of heaven. If they were ever to break free, it would not be a war. It would be an unmaking, a dissolution of logic, of harmony, of existence itself. This is the true, hidden source of Michael's legendary, unwavering, and sometimes seemingly ruthless devotion to order. His absolute, unquestioning adherence to the Creator's will is not just born of a simple, soldierly loyalty. It is born of a profound, secret, and all-consuming terror. He knows what true, primordial chaos looks like. He has fought it. He has looked into its formless, mad face. And he will do anything, he will make any sacrifice, he will strike down any who deviate even slightly from the divine plan, to prevent that chaos from ever returning. His eternal, famous battle against Lucifer is not just a battle against a fallen brother. It is a necessary and welcome distraction. It is a simpler, more straightforward conflict that keeps the attention of heaven and hell focused on each other. A grand, cosmic game of black and white pieces. And while they play their glorious, eternal game, he, alone, deals with the far greater and more fundamental threat. He is the one who must constantly monitor the cracks in the great cosmic prison, using his own will, his own divine power, his own focused, ordered essence, to constantly patch the leaks, to reinforce the conceptual walls, to keep the true, colorful, and mind-shattering chaos of the Forgotten Ones at bay. He is the most celebrated hero in all of heaven, lauded for a great victory that, while important, was secondary. And he is also the loneliest being in all of creation, the silent, eternal guardian of a horror that no one else in his world even remembers exists. His greatest victory was not in casting down his brother, Lucifer. It was in the war he fought before, the war he can never speak of, the war whose echoes still haunt his every waking moment. And his greatest tragedy is that it is a victory that he must carry, in absolute, eternal, and soul-crushing silence, forever. Sometimes, the greatest battles are the ones that are never recorded, and the most important victories are the ones that must be forgotten, even by those who fought them. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the secret history of heaven. If this unveiling of a primordial war has changed your perspective, show your support by liking this video, subscribing to the Eldritch Codex, and hitting the notification bell so you never miss another journey into the heart of our most secret and profound legends. What other mythological hero do you believe is guarding a secret far greater than the one we know? Let us know in the comments. Until next time, remember that the stories we are told are often just a shadow of the truths that have been buried deep beneath the foundations of our world.